I'd like to discuss morality's ontology and consider what is the best option, what is the best basis or premise or foundation upon which morality rests. And let's start with nature, whether that is morality's ontology. Well, nature is not a being. It has no will, no volition. Nature is not a moral agent. Therefore, nature enjoins no morality upon us at all. Now, it is, in fact, unquestionable that, yes, indeed, we can observe any group of living organisms and certainly observe that there are certain behaviors which are beneficial to the group, and that's unquestionable. Although we must consider that these in-group beneficial actions, such as altruistic acts, are generally understood to be derived from the individual's act of self-preservation. So the individual, in order to preserve themselves, realizes in some form that it must benefit the group. So it all comes down to the individual. And in a sense, again, there's something, when we're discussing nature, we're not talking about morality at all. We're merely talking about our observation of certain actions, because we might as well take a clue perhaps from the lemmings and follow in their footsteps, pun intended, and perhaps take turns committing mass suicides. Or perhaps from the apes we could learn to fight violent battles over territory and resources. But see, there's something that makes us say, well, these are the actions we want to follow and not those. And so that there's something beyond or behind nature. In nature, we're just talking about observations of actions and our interpretations of those. And also when we talk about nature, everything that's happened in human history or the history of the planet has been for our benefit, for evolutionary benefit, either by ridding us of the less fit or by preserving the more fit. And this is why people such as Sam Harris and Michael Roos and others can actually argue that rape played a beneficial evolutionary role, because it performed a certain act of increasing the rapist's ability to procreate. And indeed, when Richard Dawkins was asked whether the fact that rape is immoral is as arbitrary as the fact that we evolved to have 5 fingers instead of 6, well, he responded in the affirmative. And so one may wonder if perhaps in places such as Haiti that just suffered drastic and sudden reduction in population level, maybe rape will make an evolutionary comeback and perhaps a moral comeback. And at this point, we may ask whether something is moral because nature selected it, or whether nature selected it because it is moral. Well, at bottom, there's really no such question in nature. The only thing, if we may anthropomorphize, the only thing nature cares about is survival and reproduction. It cares not for morality. You may reproduce and survive by being moral or not. In fact, truth is not relevant in nature. You may survive and reproduce by ascertaining certain empirical facts, indeed, but you may also do the same by living a completely deluded. The only thing that matters is survival. So human dictates, is morality's ontology based on human dictates? Well, unquestionably, all human beings can reason upon moral issues, come to certain conclusions, and they may even claim that these conclusions are absolute. No question about it. That is, we can make epistemic-based statements, but not ontological. Now, of course, human dictates humanity being derived from nature in this view. We end up with the same problem that we're talking about humans' interpretation of what we should derive from nature as that which we should follow, that which we should do. And of course, in this view, we may get enough human beings to agree on a certain set of standards, and they could seek to enforce them. And maybe to the extreme on this view, morality is a way for that human beings figured out to control other human beings and to assist the survival of the group. Now, to this view, which, just for the sake of the economy of words, we may call naturalistic human derived morality, we could ask whether something is moral because the naturalistic human claims it's moral, or whether it claims it's moral because it is moral. And indeed, it would seem that if it is because the naturalistic human merely proclaims it to be moral, well, then that's really the human dictates du jour. And as human opinion changes, this may very well change, shifting around like so much quicksand, from zeitgeist to poltergeist. And so I submit that there must be something behind that and beyond that to which human beings are adhering. I'd like to read a couple of quotes, one from Dan Barker, and just notice the emphasis in these. If you wish to be a healthy person, that's why you should be moral. He means mentally healthy. If you wish to be labeled ethical by other people, if you wish to be viewed by society as a good person, if that's something you wish. And Paul Kurtz makes the point that we do not have to refer to God in moral issues because, quote, if Johnny hits Mary and Johnny's mother says don't hit Mary, why should he not hit Mary? Is it because God exists? No. If you hit Mary, she'll hit you back. She won't like you, and you won't have any friends if you continue this. The Humanist Society of Scotland states that it's best to be honest because I'm happier and feel better about myself if I'm honest. And David Brash states, be moral and your reputation will benefit. And on it goes. I think that they know what button to push. They're not appealing to morality for its own sake or for some sort of absolute human dignity or worth, but they know to apply to the individual and saying it will benefit you as an individual if you could carry out this moral activity. The view in which God is everything and or is in everything. And so God is the creator and is the creation. And so on this view, essentially morality is God telling God how God should treat God. And so God is the author, the playwright, the actor, and the audience, and the critic. Now let's consider dualism. And in this view, there's two eternal gods, and this is going to become key. They're two completely separate beings and two completely separate persons. One is generally conceived of as a good God and one as an evil God. And yet, the goodness of the one is measured up against the evil of the other and vice versa. And in fact, each considers himself to be the good God and the other the evil God. And so this absolutely is truly arbitrary. Next to pantheons, polytheism, henotheism, etc. In this view, we have many gods, whether they were created by previously existing gods or not. And again, the key is they're separate and distinct beings, separate and distinct persons. Now, since they do enjoy relationships with other divine beings, they don't necessarily consider human beings creatures with whom they want to have relationships. In fact, they're not exactly famous for their moral relationships as they are infamous for their quarreling. Now, they may view us as playthings, like so many pieces on a chessboard. They might manipulate our fates. They might take human form and fornicate with us, but there's little, if anything, that's considered a moral relationship which they enjoy with us. Next, let us consider strict monotheism. Okay, so in this view, there's one eternal God, one being, one person, completely united, not in the least bit divided. And I think it may very well be argued that this God lacks something, namely relationship, and so this God had to create humanity to enjoy that which it lacked. And yet, since this God is alone in eternity, relationship is just not a part of this God's being. And so when it creates humanity, it must necessarily concoct an arbitrary moral system for humanity to follow. Let us consider Trinitarian monotheism. Now, the view here is one single God, so we're not talking about tritheism or a triad or anything like that. And again, the key here being one being, one single unified being, and yet three persons who make up the Godhead. And so there's a unity and then there's a diversity. Three co-equal, co-eternal, coexisting persons. And so this God has eternally enjoyed relationships that are unified within God's single being and yet diverse amongst the persons. And so when it comes to God's creation of humanity, morality is derived directly from God's very nature, his very essence and very character. It is God's very essence because God is a relational being and has been so eternally. So on this view, we have morality being benevolent in that it's derived from God's being one single being, and yet it is relational in that it's enjoyed amongst the persons of the Godhead. And so in this view, this is why it seems to be that everything in the universe enjoys relationships, from the chemical to the animal and from the laws of nature to human beings. Everything, absolutely everything in the universe is in relation, expressing God's relational nature. And indeed, in the New Testament, it states that that which can be known of God, his eternal power and Godhead, can be seen in the things that were made. And so we see from the things that were made that everything is in relation, and it's based on God's very, very nature and essence. His very character is relational and moral. And so the triune God neither adheres to external morality nor constructs arbitrary morality, since they are a very part of his nature and being. And it is from this that morality's ontology most firmly rests.